There is a lot more about Project 2025 I need to tell you. Stay with me. Hello, everybody. I am Attorney Augustus Corbett, one half of the Defiant Lawyers, and each and every week we bring you at least one legal analysis of some trending story regarding politics, policies, personalities, or pop culture to empower you with the information you need to defy an unjust legal system. If that interests you, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell so you get notified every time we upload one of our powerful and informative videos. So there is a lot more to say about Project 2025, and not just Project 2025, but there are other parties involved in a wider conspiracy, a wider, what I would describe as racist conspiracy. And I'm going to connect the dots in this video. I'm going to connect the dots. All right. So you stay with me as we do just that. Now, please go over and get a copy of my book, Education and Justice, so that you will know how to advocate if you have an African-American boy in the public school system. Also, go to our website, lljp.org, and register your young man to take part in the BARS reading program. BARS is an acronym that stands for Black America Reading Strongly. We created this program to help young African-American boys develop better reading skills over the summer. All right. We started it in June of this year. It will end September 1 this year. Go over and enroll your son. It will benefit him. Hey, everyone. I am Attorney Augustus Corbett, one half of the Defiant Lawyers. Recently, I took a look at our analytics and I noticed something shocking. Many of you watch our videos, and I believe you enjoy them, but you haven't subscribed yet. What are you waiting for? Again, I was shocked because I know our content is empowering and informative. Plus, our 2024 goal is to have 150,000 subscribers before the end of the year. Please help us by hitting that subscribe button, especially you young folks. We particularly want to increase our number of young subscribers. Thanks for all your continued support. We appreciate it very much. All right, so let's get into this. Project 2025 and SCOTUS and their racist conspiracy. All right, let's go to another screen. So let's look at this because I want to connect the dots here. I want to connect the dots. So let's look at the three branches of our government that are established by the United States Constitution. Article 1, the legislative branch. Article 2, the executive branch. Article 3, the judicial branch. All right, so these three logos represent all three branches of our government. And notice underneath the White House, you see federal agencies. You see the Department of Education, the Department of Justice. You see the Federal Reserve Bank and other federal agencies there. Now, what is sort of the sticking point here, or where the tension comes from, is the fact that you have the GOP and the Democratic Party that are trying to control these branches of government, because those two political parties have different ideological worldviews, right? So they want to control these branches of government. At the moment, the GOP controls SCOTUS, the U.S. Supreme Court. They have 6 conservative members on that court. And this is an activist court. This court has made itself very clear that it's going to tell the country what the law is. So almost anything the other two branches do, the U.S. Supreme Court stands in the position ready to say, no, that is not what the law is. And they have the power and the authority to strike down anything. And in some cases, even legislate from the bench, which is what I believe they did with this most recent immunity case, having given presidents absolute immunity over criminal prosecution for their official acts. As I've explained to you, the problem is, what are official acts and what are unofficial acts? And once again, the court, those 6 conservatives will tell us what's official and what's not official. But in any event, they are vying, both political parties, which I'm neither one. I'm not Democrat or Republican. I'm an independent voter. All right. So both are vying for control of these branches of government. Right now, the Democratic Party has control over the White House, and the GOP has control over the House, whereas the Democratic Party also controls the Senate. All right. Now, those agencies underneath the White House come under the control of the president. But the GOP, Project 2025, MAGA, feels like these agencies have a whole lot more power than they should have. They call it, the GOP calls that, the administrative state. And what they believe is there are federal employees, a federal bureaucracy that is left-leaning, that is progressive in nature, that is woke, to use their term, their co-opted term, by the way, right? A term that we know does not mean what they have assigned a meaning to it. It doesn't mean that. But they've co-opted it, and they've made the word woke nefarious. So they use that nefarious meaning on the word woke to say that the federal agencies have a bunch of employees that are woke, that are liberal, that are progressive. And they don't like that. And I'm going to show you why they don't like that. And I'm going to show you what they intend to do about that. All right, now let's go back, because they've already won a huge victory to curtail the power of this alleged liberal administrative state with a recent U.S. Supreme Court case. Now, Project 2025 is very well funded, very well supported by a number of right-leaning, right-wing, white conservative, white evangelical, even racist organizations. Organizations like ALEC, the Federalist Society, the Conservative PAC, Turning Point, of course, that's Charlie Kirk, the Heritage Foundation, Dr. Kevin Roberts, the Manhattan Institute, the Faith and Freedom Coalition, of course, the GOP, Liberty University, the Southern Baptist Convention. All of these organizations are on the same page about wanting to take control of the government and then steer that government in a very, very conservative right-wing direction that essentially will protect white male hegemony. And make no question about this. Don't doubt this point. That's what this is all about. This is white fear over the fact that America could be controlled by non-white people. That's why the election of Barack Obama was so very disturbing to white conservatives. It confirmed their worst nightmare. And so they began to take steps to prevent that from ever happening again. Steps like gutting the Voting Rights Act, namely. And that was a big step toward trying to control that genie that had escaped the bottle. But guess what happened? Now we have a black female vice president. So what kind of fear do you think that brings out of the Heritage Foundation, out of the Project 2025, SCOTUS, etc. All right, so they are determined to prevent America from ever being controlled, as Ann Coulter says, by anyone other than a WASP, a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. That's what she said, right? And she doesn't speak for all white people, but she speaks for a lot of them, So this is definitely about protecting and preserving white male supremacy. So these organizations are absolutely supportive of Project 2025, but not just those organizations, but these corporations as well are huge donors, contributors to the GOP. And these are on a list, these corporations and many more are on a list of corporate backers and supporters who supported folks who denied our recent election. Companies that we all do business with. I think we need to rethink whether we need to continue doing business with them. But companies like Home Depot, FedEx, Walmart, Delta, AT&T, UPS. So the opposition is well funded and well organized. A recent U.S. Supreme Court case came down and it furthers Project 2025's goal of eliminating this alleged woke administrative state. But before I tell you what that case is, let me give you some background. In the 80s, the U.S. Supreme Court handed down the Chevron USA Inc. versus NDRC Inc. case, handed down a ruling in that case. And let me read the ruling for you. I won't get too much into the facts of the case. But the ruling basically says if a statute is silent or ambiguous with respect to a specific issue, and the federal agency's action is based on a permissible construction of the statute, give deference to the agency's construction of the statute. Okay, let me explain this. So this case had to do with the EPA. EPA handed down some regulation that was based upon its duty to provide protection for the environment. The EPA was created because of Congress. Congress enacted a law that essentially resulted in the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency. Now, when Congress enacts a law and then essentially creates a federal agency to implement and enforce that law, of course, issues will arise. And when those issues arise, then you got to look back at the statute that Congress wrote. If that statute is clear on the particular issue that has arisen, then whatever Congress says controls. But if that statute is not clear on the particular issue at hand, then you look to see what the federal agency said, what action they took. And if it is reasonable, if it's permissible, if it's a reasonable construction of the statute, then this Chevron case said you defer to that federal agency. And over time, that gave federal agencies a lot of authority. Conservatives have never liked it. Now, let me give you some background on why they don't like it. Because a lot of these conservative states really push states' rights, even as far back as slavery. When the federal government, the Union Army, came into the South to fight to end and abolish slavery, that was very offensive to Southern states. Their attitude was, these are our N-words, these are our slaves, these are our states. You don't tell us what to do with our N-words or what to do with our slaves. You Yankees, right? So they have always taken offense to the intervention of federal action, federal agents, no matter what it is. And we African Americans have oftentimes had to look to the federal government, right? Because we oftentimes could not get justice in states, state courts and state legislatures and so forth. They were too prejudiced, too racist, too white supremacists, oftentimes members of the KKK and all of that. So we had to look to the federal government that oversaw and enforced federal law, right? Like the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. We have had to look to the federal government for fair enforcement of those laws. And again, white Southern conservatives have always been offended by that. They resent that. So the more federal agencies are able to enforce the law, the more conservatives resent that. And that was the reason why the conservatives basically hated the Chevron case. And they got a big victory in a recent U.S. Supreme Court case that overturned Chevron. So white conservatives and some libertarians hated the Chevron case, again, for two reasons. It allowed federal agencies to interfere with the interests of their corporate supporters. And it allowed an alleged woke administrative state to interfere with their right-wing anti-black agenda. So white conservatives and libertarians, again, hated the Chevron case that has been gutted. I'll show you in just a moment. Because once again, the conservative movement is supported by all of those corporations and more that I just showed you, right? And those corporations hate regulations. They hate regulations. So they hate these federal agencies almost as much as, if not more than, the conservatives. And so those corporations heavily support white conservatives. Heavily. All right. You may even remember a case that was handed down, Citizens United, a few years ago when Obama was president, that gave corporations the ability to make huge contributions to political action committees. All right. So that gives them the power to basically write legislation and use money, hang money, dangle money in the face of politicians to basically get them to write those laws, enact those laws. Okay? So corporations hate federal regulations as much as conservatives. So that is one reason why organizations like ALEC, right? ALEC is a huge one. Go look it up. Support these white conservatives for race and class reasons. But also because, again, this alleged woke administrative state and these federal agencies interfere with this right-wing anti-black agenda that deeply troubles me. All right, let's keep moving. So here's the case that gutted the Chevron case. Remember, the Chevron case said two things. It said if Congress was not clear in a statute that a federal agency is responsible for implementing, and the federal agency takes an action or promulgates a regulation, if it is reasonable what they have promulgated or the action they took, then the courts would have to defer to the federal agency. Okay? They've hated it. And there are folks actually on the U.S. Supreme Court. You take, for example, Neil Gorsuch. His mother, Ann Gorsuch, was the administrator of the EPA back in the early 80s. And he has just had a beef against federal regulations since then because his mother was very conservative and she wanted to roll back a bunch of EPA regulations. Okay. And so he just sort of grew up in a family that was very conservative and extremely anti-regulation. So some of these people on the court have been their whole careers working to end regulations promulgated by these federal agencies, like a Neil Gorsuch. Others have been working their entire legal careers to gut the Voting Rights Act or the Civil Rights Act. Those are the kinds of people, those 6 conservatives who are on the court, including Clarence Thomas. All right, so this case, this most recent case that the U.S. Supreme Court handed down just a week or two ago, the Loper Bright Enterprises case, it held the Administrative Procedure Act, APA, requires courts to exercise their independent judgment in deciding whether an agency has acted within its statutory authority, and courts may not defer to an agency interpretation of the law simply because a statute is ambiguous. Chevron is overruled. So this Loper Bright Enterprises case got rid of the Chevron case. So now judges cannot defer to federal agencies simply because a statute may be ambiguous. The judges must now make decisions about whether a federal agency, regulation, or action is constitutional. So as I read that opinion, to me, it felt like not only is it dangerous for vulnerable communities, but it is a huge power grab by the courts, by SCOTUS. Huge. So they have put it in the hands of federal judges to decide if a federal agency has promulgated a constitutional regulation. So think about it. Just think about it. What would be step 2 with this? If they said federal judges must determine if a federal agency violates the Constitution with its regulation or action, then what would be the next reasonable step? It is to continue to pack the courts with right-wing judges. You follow me? And it is the reason why they will stick with Trump no matter what. Now, why is it racist, by the way? Because take, for example, the EPA. Just take, for example, the EPA. One of the biggest issues that Black Americans deal with, it's not talked about a lot, but it's a big issue. Environmental racism. Because states, corporations love to put toxic waste, toxic dumps in Black communities. Love to put corporations that emit a lot of toxins in the air in the Black community. Toxins in the water, in the food, in the Black community. Just go to the average Black community, find out where the dump is, find out where the corporation is that is contaminating the water system, and it's in the Black community. They never put those in white communities. Never, ever. Affluent white, never. Always in the Black community. And it is the reason why Black people tend to deal with a disproportionate percentage of many medical conditions because of environmental racism. These corporations could care less. All they care about is making money. And all their politicians that they have paid off care about is keeping their corporate supporters happy. So who gets the short end of the stick? Black America and other vulnerable populations. So that's why it's racist. And it is a conspiracy because these people, the people on the court, the people at Heritage, the people in those organizations that I showed you, they obviously flow in the same system. They are part of the Federalist Society. They are part of CPAC. They are part of those conservative groups. They talk amongst themselves. That's not surprising because they're friends, they're comrades. So they develop, they say to one another, I'm sure in private meetings and over dinner and on the golf course, We need to get rid of Chevron. We need to get rid of that Chevron case. We need to get rid of this deep state. We need to get rid of this administrative state. And Trump is just the man to help us get it done because, he'll do whatever. And he's not very, thoughtful about these things. All we got to do is just tell him what to do. Give him a list. Like the Federalist Society gave him a list of judges. And Project 2025 boasts that 2/3 of their policy suggestions, Trump implemented them during his last administration. So these folks out here who say, well, Trump doesn't agree with Project 2025. It doesn't matter what Trump agrees with. He's going to do it. He has no other choice. They're putting him in office. They're paying for his campaign. They're going to be running his administration. Project 2025 has told us that it has summoned white conservatives, black conservatives too, to come to the White House, come to D.C., and we're going to replace those leftists, those liberals, those progressives with you folks so that you can get rid of all the DEI, all of the, any racial preference, any sort of equity, anything to help black people. We're going to put you in a place to get rid of all of that. That is a racist conspiracy. So the U.S. Supreme Court gave Project 2025 white conservatives a huge victory. Of course, there was a huge victory with the immunity case. Also a huge victory for some of the January 6 folks. Most people, however, have not heard about and understand how important it was that Chevron was overruled by SCOTUS, which again basically means that federal agencies will not get the respect of being able to promulgate a regulation and just having carte blanche power to enforce it. Courts will have to decide that. And if Project 2025 and Trump and MAGA have their way, the judge that goes in front of will be a right-wing judge, so that federal agencies are not able to make these decisions. They're made by corporations. And I really want you to understand this piece about corporations, because in some ways, this is not just about how Project 2025 can affect black people, but everybody. And I'm going to keep showing you via videos what Project 2025 has in store for our country. And I'm just scratching the surface. There's a 932-page manual that they released. And by the way, if you think that this is not a war that continues, watch this video. Watch this video.
In spite of all this nonsense from the left, we are going to win. We're in the process of taking this country back. And let me speak about the radical left. You and I have both been parts of faculties and faculty senates and understand that the left has taken over our institutions. The reason that they are apoplectic right now, the reason that so many anchors on MSNBC, for example, are losing their minds daily is because our side is winning. And so I come full circle in this response and just want to encourage you with some substance that we are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
That's war. In case you thought I was being hyperbolic here, that's war. That's what it is. And he says that is Dr. Kevin Roberts of the Heritage Foundation, president of the Heritage Foundation. He said that they're winning and that we're in the middle of the Second American Revolution and it will remain bloodless if the left allows it. In other words, try to stop it, and there will be war, bloodshed, death, shooting, guns. That's what he said. That's the only way to read that. It will remain bloodless unless the left tries to stop it, tries to prevent it. We're ready. Our powder is dry. Dr. Roberts, you ought to be shaming yourself. You ought to be shaming yourself for trying to incite violence like that. Because let me just say, from what I'm seeing, from what I'm understanding, it won't be like it was in the past, where folks just show up in black communities and just commit massacres. It won't be that way with the folks out there now. And, back then, blacks couldn't even legally own firearms. But a whole lot of black folks have absolutely picked up firearms, have many of them, and many are being trained and so on. Which is why I say it's shameful that you said that, because we don't need a war, another revolution or civil war in this country. We don't need that. So please go somewhere and get yourself together and calm down. Calm down. Because, again, no one is afraid. No one's afraid of what you're saying. So get a grip. That's what I want to say to you. Get a grip. If you are a man of faith, which I'm sure you probably say you are, go pray. Go open your Bible. Get on your knees. Because that is definitely not Christian talk. All right, so that's my response to him. So if you doubt that we're in war, you got another thing coming. All right, now let's go back to my screen. So again, to show you that SCOTUS and Project 2025 works in tandem on this, this manual says our goal is to assemble an army of aligned, vetted, trained, and prepared conservatives to go to work on day one to deconstruct the administrative state. Okay? He goes on to say the DEI revolution in labor affected not only the administrative state, but it has also targeted much of the private sector, owing to the combination of regulatory pressure and eager human resources offices in the private sector. Much of American labor and employment policy has become institutionally oriented toward woke goals. And then he says, dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people. All right? Those are the goals of Project 2025, and you see that they are aligned and consistent with the goals of the 6 conservatives on the United States Supreme Court. And they are consistent with the GOP in Congress, in state legislatures, and across the country. This is a conspiracy. There's no other way to see it. And this conspiracy will have the worst impact on vulnerable minority communities, most especially African Americans. So Project 2025 is not something to become hysterical about, but as the scripture says, it is something that we should be aware of, we should know it, we should understand it, and then prepare for it. Prepare for it. And not be like the simpleton who says, oh, this is just fear-mongering, and then it's too late before they realize, no, this is not fear-mongering. Dr. Roberts just told us. He just said they're taking this country back. They're making America great again. Great in their eyes. And again, can only refer back to Jim Crow or slavery, even worse. So this is not fear-mongering. Dr. Roberts and his group have released a 900-page book, their own social media, their own meme media, saying we're taking back our country, and if you try to stop us, there will be bloodshed. So I'm not pushing fear. This is the reality. And you need to get prepared for it by understanding what Project 2025 is. Okay? All right. I am attorney Augustus Corbett, one half of the Defiant Lawyers, and each and every week we bring you this very type of legal analysis to help you defy an unjust legal system and to nullify systemic racism. Until the next time, peace.